It's put up or shut up time for an election conspiracy theory. A judge wants to know who has a copy of a county's election server. Adams County leaders don't trust their treasurer to keep track of the money, but a court won't let them bring in someone else to do the job. A long-shot candidate for Secretary of State says he wants to make the office boring again.
Well, it should be an unexciting office.
At Colorado's hundreds of small food stores, costs are rising for businesses and rural Coloradans. And not even the wind can knock down your good news on a Friday.
My good news is you should start each day with the thought you're winning because you woke up.
Look at all you winners. Glad you're here for Next. Some mystery person out there has a copy of a voting system server from Colorado. A judge today demanded to know who has it. Who has a copy of the election server from Elbert County? It's one of 8 known election security breaches since 2020 by people who are searching for evidence of voter fraud. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger joins us now from Elbert County, where Republican clerk Dallas Schroeder copied this election server, gave a copy, Marshall, to some mystery person the judge wants to know but does not want the public to see.
For now, right now, the judge has ordered, as you said, Republican Elbert County Clerk Dallas Schroeder to reveal to the judge who this other person was, how long they had it, a chain of custody. But for now, that's just for the judge. Part of the reason Schroeder's team argued they don't want this person to be harassed. The judge also ordered that Schroeder share, as I said, where it's been at all times, and that information has to be provided by the end of Tuesday. So far, the judge has not ordered that Schroeder turn over the hard drives to the Secretary of State. The Elbert County Courthouse was the happening place to be this afternoon, filled with Schroeder supporters. Here's what I learned in court. Schroeder has both copies of the hard drive in his control, but he doesn't physically have both. And I'm not sure how both can be true. Schroeder's attorney did say the copies are not in the same place at the same time. He said Schroeder is willing to send one at a time to Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold as long as he gets them back and as long as they're not together at the same time. The judge has not ruled on that yet. The attorneys for the Secretary of State argued that these were unauthorized copies of the election server, and allowing Schroeder to avoid handing them over would give county clerks the green light to do whatever they want. Something that wasn't discussed in court today, Kyle, but was put in court filings is quite interesting. In a separate case in Delaware, Dominion Voting Systems has sued Fox News Network for defamation. As part of that case, Fox News was able to get a subpoena to get Elbert County's copies of these election servers. And in those court filings, Schroeder argued that by having to hand them over to the Secretary of State, it would prevent Fox News the ability to get them through the subpoena. Willing to get them possibly to Fox News Network, but not willing to just hand them over to the Secretary of State.
We just hope the folks who are watching this night after talking about this realize that this whole election fraud conspiracy, the whole big lie, is centered on Colorado. Some of the first people to push it were here. The folks busting into voting systems looking for the proof are here. Colorado's the nexus of this thing.
And what was argued in court, the Secretary of State's attorneys, who are attorney generals, wanted to know what's on these hard drives. And even Schroeder's own team said they don't know what's on these hard drives because Schroeder supposedly just made the copies and they've been sealed ever since and no one's looked at them. So as far as I know, everybody in court wants to know what's on these hard drives, but nobody really does.
Wild day. Marshall Zellinger, the man tracking this story better than anybody else. Marshall, thank you. A judge is not going to allow Adams County's Democratic commissioners to bring in somebody else to count the county's money, to do the job of County Treasurer Lisa Culpepper, fellow Democrat. This week, a judge rejected the commissioner's attempt to have somebody else come in and clean up the county's books. Culpepper's in her 4th full year serving as county treasurer. Commissioners accused Culpepper of shoddy record keeping that's putting the county's money at risk. An audit found issues in accounting and a lack of communication from the treasurer's office. Culpepper denies doing anything wrong. We were curious whether the state treasurer had any kind of power to remove Culpepper from her duties. We've talked about this as it relates to elections, how Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold went in and removed Republican Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters from overseeing elections last year, saying that she wasn't trusted. Treasurer Dave Young's office tells us, to the best of their knowledge, They do not have any authority to go in and do anything with the Adams County treasurer. Democratic State Rep Matt Gray, who's focused on transportation issues in the legislature, has one of his own. He will not be driving to work for the remainder of his term. Broomfield police have yanked his driver's license after Gray was arrested on suspicion of drunk driving. We've been reporting on this arrest since it happened last week. Gray refused a field sobriety test and later said his symptoms were a panic attack, not intoxication. Staff at his children's after-school program were concerned enough about his state that they called police. Our legal analyst, Scott Robinson, said earlier this week that Gray was going to lose his driver's license. That's what happens when you refuse a roadside sobriety test. If the case goes to a jury, police are going to have to rely on other evidence. The state Supreme Court is refusing to hear the appeal of the Republican congressional candidate who claimed that an insult against President Joe Biden should appear as the candidate's official nickname on the ballot. State Rep Dave Williams failed in his attempt to get that slur on the ballot as his nickname, but he did succeed in getting us to say his name a bunch of times as he runs a far-right primary challenge against Republican Congressman Doug Lamborn. The GOP primary for Secretary of State's a clear-cut matchup between election rigging conspiracy theorist, Mason County Clerk Tina Peters, and former Jeffco Clerk Pam Anderson, who says that our elections are secure. But there is actually a third long-shot candidate on the ballot, Yuma County business consultant Mike O'Donnell, who stoked theories of voter fraud by pointing out issues with Colorado's voter rolls.
My observation as someone who's actually looking through the roll, taking the time to page through the endless spreadsheets and find things, I'm just finding some things that just don't seem to be 100% accurate. And technology isn't perfect. Voter rolls aren't perfect. The mail system isn't perfect. So we just need to be vigilant and make sure that we try and keep our rolls as clean as we possibly can.
In your extensive search through Colorado's voter rolls, have you found anything that you have been able to link to voter fraud, which is, of course, a very different matter than who appears on the voter rolls?
Correct. There's only one.
Only one. That one example, O'Donnell said, was a ballot coming from a house that a friend of his used to own. O'Donnell says he would like the Secretary of State's office to focus more on its non-election function, dealing with business registrations.
It doesn't really do anything to help small businesses now, but if you look at it, the more than 1 million business filings that occur every year in Colorado pretty much pay for 90% of the day-to-day operations of the Secretary of State's office, even though they don't do very much to help businesses. We have about 850,000 businesses pay their $10 renewal fee each year. And we have about 150,000 new business formations every year in Colorado. But of that 150,000 new businesses, we only see about 15 to 16% of those businesses create jobs. And as a state like Colorado, where we haven't yet recovered our unemployment rate to pre-COVID, which many states have, we're lagging behind most states. To do that, the Secretary of State's office could be cooperative with the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. It could promote the Minority Business Office if the businesses are minority owned. It could not be a silo and just keep that information to itself.
We're inviting on all the candidates. You can see my full unedited conversation with O'Donnell and the conversation with Pam Anderson on the next YouTube channel. Tina Peters' campaign has not responded to interview requests. So just days after they flipped the switch to turn the thing on, Jefferson County's new emergency notification system got its first test. High winds pushed a grass fire this morning in Arvada, and it forced some house-to-house evacuations. The fire got going around noon in the area of West 86th and Fenton Street. It burned an area about 100 yards long near some railroad tracks and took out some fences and sheds. Evacuation orders went out through Jeffco's new Lookout Alert system. The system was announced on Wednesday. It covers Jeffco, City and County of Broomfield, and Westminster. The evacuations were lifted about an hour later when firefighters got things under control. So you have now supported 99 weekly Word of Thanks microgiving campaigns, small donations for mostly small to mid-sized nonprofits in our state, where we know that those dollars pooled together go a long way. Like what you are doing in a very rural part of Colorado this week. Los Animas Helping Hands provides food assistance, energy bill help, even budgeting classes for low-income families in Bent County. They're an all-volunteer operation to maximize every dollar donated, and you have given nearly 20,000 of them this week. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 to join me and a bunch of other generous Coloradans in giving to Los Animas Helping Hands, where they estimate that they are helping 1 in 5 residents of that county. next week is your 100th Word of Thanks microgiving campaign.
Coloradans in small towns depend on their grocery stores to avoid driving long distances. Those independent food shops are getting squeezed, so are families. Your Friday good news includes facts you never knew you needed to know.
My good news is we designated Littleton the flowering crabapple capital of Colorado.
There is never a bad reason to feel good, even if you're watching the news. That's next.
The struggle to afford fresh, healthy food in Colorado begins even before shoppers pull out their wallets. It's a challenge these days for smaller neighborhood grocery stores that are having difficulty affording what they want to be able to sell at a price that people can pay. Our Nusha Roy looks at that ripple effect across our state.
Zuma Natural Foods
in Minkus, Colorado,
is in a town that's used to being independent.
There's no place to grocery shop in between here and Cortez and in between here and Durango. So either direction, you're either driving 20 minutes or 30 minutes just to get to the town. There isn't public transportation to get in between. There's no cab service.
As much as a town of 1,400 depends on what they can find at Zuma, getting food there is tricky. The owner, Kate Wall, used to work closer to the metro area.
We were able to get 2 or 3 produce deliveries a day. The most that I'm able to get a distributor to come to my area is once a week.
She said her store is so far, it doesn't financially make sense for distributors to come by more often. Smaller stores also deal with additional costs when they accept deliveries, especially if they have to tailor it to fit their needs and capacity.
There's definitely a cost that gets passed along for sure.
Nourished Colorado said challenges around stocking shelves with fresh food and how much that ultimately costs for families is playing out across the state with around 700 small independent food stores.
Physically accessible, oftentimes very culturally accessible. A lot of smaller stores are like managed or owned by someone who lives in that community or owned by first-generation immigrants.
Many times these are stores closest to families, and the ones families are relying on SNAP benefits can actually access.
And she had questions about why the cost of groceries that she could purchase with her SNAP benefit costed more in certain communities over others.
That's when Democratic Representative Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez started hearing from people worried about affording their groceries.
And we learned it was because of distribution.
So now there is a bill being debated in the Capitol to give $7 million to some of these smaller stores to help them cover some of these costs and ultimately make food more affordable. So one of the ways these grants could be used is to cover the technology that's needed for smaller grocery stores to actually even process the SNAP benefits so that families don't have to travel further to bigger stores and use them more easily closer to home. Ultimately, this would help 280 stores, right? So that's not near the 700 stores that are here in Colorado, but it's just going to depend on how the grants break down and if they can help more than that.
I think there's a similar supply line challenge with what I heard talking to people in Bent County for this week's Word of Thanks, where they said, operating as a food pantry, they're worried about their supply line, want to become more localized. What can they get from farmers and ranchers in case they can't rely on what they've always relied on?
Yeah, and that's interesting because Kate said the exact same thing, right? They said at one point during the pandemic, their food pantry didn't get a delivery for 3 weeks straight. That's really scary for that community where they're just not getting the food that they need. So ever since then, they've been looking at supply. They've been looking at driver shortages. How do you get food to drive, really far distances without spoiling? Again, just trying to be more self-sufficient so they don't find themselves in that place again.
Interesting to hear those challenges spanning rural Colorado, east to west. Thank you, Nusha.
There are no weather delays for your good news. We will keep playing.
We're originally from Kansas, my wife and I.
Hold on. Our favorite end of the week tradition is next.
So many families have Friday traditions. Yours and ours here together on Next is we always make time on this day to share our good news. You decide the headlines here, anything that's positive in your world. Wind tried to mess with our tradition today when Tom Cole took his camera to Littleton's famous crabapple route.
It's pretty windy out here.
We're originally from Kansas, my wife and I.
I did see the tree break, yes.
The wind, nice. A little bit too much.
My good news is we designated Littleton the flowering crabapple capital of Colorado.
My good news is that my mom was homeless for 5 years. She just moved to New York and she finally got her a place and everything. They're on the process of building their own house and hopefully one day we can move to New York with her.
I enjoy them. They're pretty. It makes the drive coming home and going to work real pretty throughout the summertime and springtime. It's real nice actually looking at it.
My good news is you should start each day with the thought you're winning because you woke up.
My good news is I got my project car running again. It's been a minute since after, COVID and all the shipping delays and working and all that stuff had hit real hard. It's real nice actually to have something going good this year. So hopefully things keep going good for people and start changing for the future.
Happy Friday. You made it through the week, but critical fire weather conditions continue tonight. A cool front raced across Colorado today. We managed 70 before it got here in Denver, mid-80s to the south. The gusty west to northwest winds coming around the backside of the surface low, setting up over Nebraska. A line of severe storms is set to move east of Colorado tonight with hail and tornadoes. Still dealing with gusty winds out of the northwest. This hour, winds to 50 and 60 miles per hour in a red flag warning area. We continue to see low humidity, gusty winds, and temperatures above average. We might see some improvement tomorrow as the system pulls away. The winds die down after sunset, and an east to northeast flow may transport in not only cooler air for your weekend, but calmer weather. Upper 60s Saturday, 70s Sunday, and then cooler with a good chance for rain on Monday.
Turkeys getting in the way, and one of your questions about politicians, but I repeat myself. That's next. It's a sign that's given us the bird. Amy Lou sent this from near McIntosh Lake. It was a rare watch out for crossing cats and turkey sign, probably because of that guy. Apparently there are enough wild turkeys in the neighborhood that sign is warranted. If you see a sign that makes you look twice, let's see it. Email next@9news.com. Very fair question feedback tonight from Chris, who says, how do you determine whether to use the label far right for a politician versus just run-of-the-mill conservative? Well, if somebody's at the far end of the conservative spectrum of politics in our state, then that's when they'll generally get that label. But of course, all labels are subjective, and conservative politics certainly has gotten muddy since Trump entered the picture. Not particularly conservative, and he reshaped the landscape. Frank says, my wife once bought me a sport coat with patches on the elbows, but that was like 50 years ago. Did you donate it to a thrift shop, Frank? This could be yours. You a 40 regular? See you next time.